Alrighty, so I'm here with Jayme Parker from NESN. So Jayme, how have you been?
I've been fine, fine.
So this is going to be about like how you're in communications and like how you got to where you are pretty much.
Okay.
So how did you get into this field? Like where did you start?
So I was at undergrad in Connecticut, and I was a nursing major. Yeah, so crazy, so different. I actually do think I would have been a good nurse, but I also had a communication minor, and then I took a couple courses in communications, and there was a teacher down in my one of my broadcasting classes, and he was like, "Oh my God, you're so good at this. Like, you should really look into this." And I was like, "I'm going to be a nurse." And then he got my wheels turning a little bit, and I did a couple things at the hospital for my nursing thing, and then I kept thinking about what he said, and so literally my junior year, I flipped my majors and my minor, and I just started taking all these communications and broadcasting classes, and I just fell in love with it. And then I went and got my master's at Emerson, which is how I ended up in Boston. And while I was at Emerson, I was working at a couple of the local stations here, 4, 5, and 7. That's what they were at the time. I think they're 10, 4, and 5 now. But NBC, CBS, and CBS, and ABC. And I was just doing prompter and running scripts and doing all kinds of different things, but really learning the rope. And then literally my second, I think it was like the beginning of my second year at Channel 4, a couple of the guys that I met there who were reporters for a really long time, they're like, "Why don't you come out with us and you can, do your own story?" And I was like, "Okay." And it was just magical. And that's how I kind of got the itch. And then I started doing all my own stories and doing my own stuff on my side. And then I got a job at, well, after I was working at 4, 5, and 7, I got a job at NESN, actually just doing the weekend sports desk. It was called at the time. I don't know what it's called now, sports update or something, but it was called sports desk. And from there, I've been there for 20 something years. So it's been going pretty good.
So how did you decide that, or before I ask that, just well, actually, no, you already answered that question.
Okay.
So how did you decide that sports was your calling?
So I actually wasn't sure about sports being my calling, because I was like, oh, I really like entertainment and blah, blah, blah. But I knew more about sports. So I hate to say it was like easy way a little bit, but it kind of was, because I kind of grew up in a family where my father was a huge Red Sox fan, a huge Giants fan, not that I'm a New York Giants fan, but we always had games on in our house. Both my older brothers played football. I played little league baseball. I was the only girl on my team. Like we had a kind of an athletic family where a lot of us played sports, and I was the oldest girl. So my younger sisters really weren't involved in sports at all, but we just kind of we were really interested in it, and I knew the sports, I knew the rules, I knew all that stuff. So for me, it was kind of an easy transition. And I wasn't surrounding myself with, besides reading like People magazine, where I didn't know a lot about entertainment and the celebrities. So I said, sports, I think I'll go to the sports. And there was some good sports stations up here, and a great sports town Boston is. So I feel like it was a pretty easy sell for me.
Gotcha. So who or my next question is, how was being on the sports desk different from your show now?
So sports desk, that was just anchoring. And as much as anchoring's fun and you get to be like the face of the show and stuff like that, I never really loved reading off a teleprompter. I kind of liked kind of going off the cuff and doing my own thing and being out there with the people. When you're in a studio, you're really just kind of surrounded by your photographers and maybe a floor manager and maybe a producer or something, and maybe somebody's in your ear kind of running the chyron, but it's not as exciting as like being at a game or going to cover an event or something. Like, I always enjoyed that much more. I just felt like I connected with people a little bit better. So for me, over the years of covering, you know, all the 4 major sports here, or, you know, we could say 5 in Boston, that I just started to learn more about people when I was in the field. When I was anchoring, I wasn't really with them as much. I wasn't in their faces. And when I was in the locker room, I would hear things and I would pay attention, and I just would learn different things about somebody. So if, say I was in the Red Sox locker room, I would hear so and so talking about how, oh, I just went bowling the other day with my kids. You know, I'm so good at it, blah, 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 or whatever. And I would be like, oh, he really likes bowling. You know what I mean? And then that's how I developed this show, which had been in the works for a long time. I've been thinking about it for years, trying to put it together and trying to make it work, and how I was going to make it work. Didn't really know the business side of it all that much. I had to really learn as I was going. And so I went and I approached NESN about it, and I said, hey, I want to do this show. It's going to be called Outside the Fame. I'm going to take, you know, any athlete who has any sort of New England connection, and just kind of show a different side of them, not how they made their money, not their sport, but something else that they either like, or they're passionate about, or they already have skills in that whatever field it is. And so they're like, all right, well, you know, you got to do this, 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 and that. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do that. Like, I had to sell my own sponsorship. I still have to sell my own sponsorship. I still have to get my own athletes. I had to hire my own production company, which they do behind the B for NESN as well. So I knew they had quality of work. I interviewed 3 different production companies, and I sort of went with the middle of the road production company, and not because they were middle of the road price wise, but because of their experience and who they had done. And I knew a couple of the guys in the production company too. So it definitely still is sort of a learning curve for me. I'm still figuring things out as we go. I wish I would be better at selling sponsorship. I'm really not that good at it. I kind of have sort of figured it out, but now that the show is doing very well on NESN and it's very successful, I feel it's a little bit easier because the show can sell itself a little bit more than me just trying to talk about it. And but now I got something to back it up. You know, I have a reel with all the shows on it, little clips of it, and I can kind of give people an idea as to what the format is all about. So for me, it's all about the athlete. Like, it's not about me. And I love that it's not about me. I love that it's about them, and really kind of showing. And the athletes really love talking about something that they don't have to talk about all the time. Normally, when they had to talk about their sport, it was every day, like what they're doing in the field, on the court, wherever sport they played. And this is something that they really enjoy talking about. So I feel like it was a good niche. And because of my relationship with the athletes, you know, that every athlete that I've called up so far to do an episode on, no one has said no, which is so nice. So that has made it a little bit easier for me too. As a matter of fact, I've had a couple players call me and ask me to be an episode. And I was like, well, I don't have sponsorship for you yet, but if I find it, then I'll let you know. So, which is kind of cool. And I've also found athletes that really don't have that outside the fame kind of anything. They're like, oh, well, I don't do anything. And I was like, well, then you can't be a show. So I've had to turn away some pretty good athletes because they literally couldn't come up with anything. And I don't want to do golf because everybody plays golf. So I'm not really doing that. So they really do kind of have to, but you know, they play an instrument, they sing, they whatever, you know, there's all kinds of things we can come up with if they do it, you know.
That's
So
a really
that's
cool,
how
like,
it's kind of, that's how I got to where I am right now.
yeah, that's a really cool, like, insight too, because it's like behind the V, you just get like behind the scenes of like
Mm-hmm.
that week of the season.
Right.
But like
Yep.
yours is like a personal touch. I really like that.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, it's all about them, which is nice, and they really kind of enjoy that too.
Alrighty. And then, so who has been the most interesting guest on the show, and who has been like your favorite person to interview or just meet in general?
So not show wise or whatever.
It can be show or just in general.
Oh, that's so tough because I'm telling you, I've run into a couple duds over the years, which I won't talk about them, but I really have there. Some of these guys are really so interesting when you do sit them down. So Drew Bledsoe was my first interview that I did for the show, and what I found very interesting about him is that we were doing it on his wine. You know, he's got this wine business and it's very, very successful. But what I found very intriguing is that he knows all about it. Like he doesn't just put his name on the label. He knows the type of soil, the type of grapes, he knows everything about it. And I was really impressed on how he did all his own research and really kind of dove into learning the business and didn't just put his name on something. When you do see that with a lot of athletes where, you know, they lend their name to a lot of different, you know, restaurants or wines or whatever, and then they don't really take the time to learn how the whole business works. But that is not the way that happened with Drew. Drew really does know a lot about it. He's really invested the time to learn everything and know how it runs and know, he knows what kind of weather it needs. He knows everything about it, like every detail, which is really impressive.
That's really cool because I know
Mm.
so many celebrities have their own like alcohol now. Like The Rock
Yeah.
has tequila.
Yep.
The Jenners also have a tequila. Ryan Reynolds, I think, has like two.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And I
like it,
love tequila, just saying out loud. That's my favorite.
but who has been like in like not even like interview standpoint, like your most interesting person that you've met?
Interesting. So it's funny, like interesting. I don't, not sure. Like everybody does have their own little story, but I can tell you that I don't really get starstruck when it comes to a lot of athletes. I think only, I'm going to say probably 3 times in my interviewing of all the athletes I've interviewed have I been like, wow, I'm on an interview, honey. Sorry.
Sorry.
And there's my son Jackson.
Bye.
Hey, Jackson.
I think one time I was standing in front of Michael Jordan and I was like, wow, I was really like just blown away. And just because I know all the hard work he put into what he accomplished and his stature and everything about him just spoke like, you know, legend. And I was standing in front of him and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And I sort of had to take a deep breath and then grab my composure, and then I was able to go on with the interview. But at first I was like, "Ooh, this is." I don't usually get sweaty or nervous or anything like that. So, but I did for him for some reason. I don't even know why. I'm not even a Bulls fan. Never been a Bulls fan, but I think he stands on his own. So.
All right, and I'm gonna revert back to your show a little bit and just like life in general. During the
Mhm.
past year, obviously, was COVID.
Right.
How did that like affect like the production of your show or like even people like wanting to read like for you to like go interview them? Because I know you
Mhm.
said no one said no, but like was
Yeah.
anyone like cautious about it?
So it wasn't, I never found an athlete who was cautious about it. But they didn't want to put it out there that they weren't cautious about it. I think so I did end up doing a couple productions where we had to mask up and then separate by 6 feet. At the time it was 6 feet. I think it's 3 now, but 6 feet, and then do the interview kind of facing each other like that. So we made sure we put the masks on and then we took them off once we got our distance from each other. And the crew was wearing their masks at the same you know, same time that we were both sitting there. So I think we really do, we wanted people to know that we were taking the right precautions, even though we were continuing our production, because people still wanted to do it. And we did count on a lot of people. So it was tough to cancel things. And we really didn't want to go down that, you know, path where we
Yeah.
had to cancel anything. So, and one of the interviews that I did during COVID was Rick Middleton, former Bruin, former captain of the Bruin, like a great human being. And he had so many different kinds of different parts of this episode that we did that we really just didn't want to cancel it. So.
Okay, and another fun fact that I know about you is you're the first woman PA at the Garden for the Bruins. So
That
how
is
is
a
that
fun fact. Well, that is a fun fact. And it actually came up when they asked me to do it. I actually had no idea, to be quite honest, that there hadn't been a woman that had ever done that. I was sort of surprised to hear that. I'm happy to kind of lead the way. I'm not sure that they've had a woman since then, which is kind of funny. Like, I don't know if that means I did a bad job, but they said I did a good job. So, yeah, that's. I mean, it was. couple years ago. So I was like, wow, you guys are a little behind the times. But then I became the first woman in Revolution history to do the same thing for the Revolution. And I think it was literally probably just because I did the Bruins, and then the Revolution were like, oh, we should have her there here too. So it is down the road, maybe when I got some grandchildren or something, that might be a fun trivia question. But at the end of the day, I'm happy to lead the way for plenty of pioneered women to come behind and do their own thing and make their own steps. And but I don't care about a pat on the back, or I'm just happy to actually get it done for somebody else to continue on.
And this is me asking, what is your favorite like sport to cover when you cover it?
So that's a difficult question, because baseball is my favorite sport. But to cover, I'm going to say either football or hockey are my favorite, because of the toughness. I really love like hardcore athletes, and I would say that baseball players are, not that they're not hardcore, I think they're tough athletes, but I feel like hockey players can get all their teeth knocked out and go back on the ice, and football players, they'll, I think Tom Brady played with something wrong with a broken foot or something. I mean, a lot of these guys play with a lot of injuries, and I just commend that. I feel like they deserve a lot of credit for that. And so for those reasons, I really like the game. I love the sport to watch. Baseball seems to kind of drag on sometimes, even though I do love baseball. I mean, I grew up watching baseball. I love baseball. I'm kind of an old school girl where I really do love it. I wasn't surrounded by hockey growing up in Connecticut. So for me, I love baseball, and I really love to be there for the action too. But sometimes it's an entire day when you're covering a baseball game. In hockey, you could be out of there in 2.5 hours, or same, football maybe a little bit longer. But I just love covering those two sports the best.
Alrighty, so that was Jayme Parker. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you, Sam. So fun.